Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Arun Gupta. He is a journalist and a contributor to The Guardian in these times, The Progressive and Truth Out. Hi, Arun.
Hi, Sonali.
A Staten Island grand jury has decided not to charge NYPD officer Daniel Pantaleo for the death of Eric Garner, an African-American man who was arrested in July and died. Garner has been seen widely on online videos being surrounded by police officers and placed in a chokehold by Pantaleo. Garner fell to the ground with several officers on top of him and was heard repeatedly saying, "I can't breathe," before he died. His death was ruled a homicide by the medical examiner. Garner's last words have turned into a rallying cry by thousands of New Yorkers who've been protesting in Manhattan. The grand jury decision fuels existing nationwide outrage sparked by a similar decision in St. Louis to not charge Ferguson officer Darren Wilson. The NYPD has been slammed for an attempt to mollify activists via a #WeHearYou social media campaign, which seems to have backfired. Now, Arun, you're from New York. What is the sense that you get of how people in New York might be reacting? Rage, hurt, both, much more that can't even be put into words?
Well, clearly there's just widespread outrage. What we saw last night was people peacefully shutting down the West Side Highway, Times Square, 125th Street in Harlem, Columbus Circle. This, I think, is just clear evidence that there's basically a war on black people in this country, and I think more generally a war on poor people. But the fact that a man can be choked to death in front of a video camera and it be determined that he wasn't choked to death essentially is completely outrageous. But we should remember also that this is really no different than the brutal beating of Rodney King that happened over 20 years ago in Los Angeles that was also caught on videotape, and the officers were all found innocent in that case as well. That for a black person to exist is to be guilty in the eyes of America. If Eric Garner were a blonde cheerleader, this would have never flown. The officer would have been under indictment and would be facing homicide charges.
Right. And we'll have more coverage on the Eric Garner case on our show tomorrow with Nation magazine writer Michael Denzel Smith. 16 states have joined Texas in filing a lawsuit against President Barack Obama, claiming that his November 20th announcement of executive action on immigration was illegal. Utah and Wisconsin have joined southern states like Alabama and Georgia to contend that the immigration policy changes will add to the strain of state budgets. According to Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott, Obama was abdicating his responsibility to faithfully enforce the laws that were duly enacted by Congress and attempting to rewrite immigration laws, which he has no authority to do, end of quote. Other legal experts, including those who have worked in the Department of Homeland Security, disagree, saying the president is, quote, well within his legal authority. Well, Arun, is this lawsuit by these states more symbolic than anything, just so Republican lawmakers can say to their anti-immigrant constituents that they're opposing Obama?
I think that's accurate. It's probably not going to get anywhere, but the problem with this also is will give the mistaken impression that somehow Obama has done something brave and significant. I mean, he basically punted on immigration reform time and again when he had the political capital to do something really significant, whether it was really do something in terms of economic restructuring, the student loan crisis, the home mortgage crisis, climate change, immigration. He delayed, and acted like, he needed Republicans to do it. So it comes very late into his presidency where he passes what is essentially an apartheid-style immigration solution. It's like, yes, to a degree it does allow immigrants to come out of the shadows, but they are still under the threat of deportation as soon as someone else comes into office is still very contingent.
Right.
So the Republicans, it allows them to oppose it, but it doesn't really do anything for the immigrants themselves.
And finally, President Obama yesterday announced a major new plan aimed at alleviating the conditions facing Native American youth. The initiative, dubbed Generation Indigenous, emerged from a series of meetings with members of indigenous groups that started several months ago. According to AP, it, quote, calls for programs focused on better preparing young American Indians for college and careers and developing leadership skills. More than 1/3 of American Indian youth live in poverty, and just over 2/3 graduate from high school. An earlier government-commissioned report highlighted shocking rates of violence experienced by young people that result in rates of PTSD rivaling Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans. Arun, how does Obama compare with other presidents on improving social conditions of indigenous youth?
Well, I think, again, this is one of these programs that is more rhetoric and hot air that's going to do anything significant. The federal government has really done very little for indigenous people except try to exterminate them over the last couple hundred of years. A program like this is just like, yes, it will probably help some Native youth, and that is encouraging, but at the same time, it's not going to do anything really to change the condition on the reservations. And in fact, I've been covering a lot of climate change and energy development stories of late. And if the government really wanted to help Native people, the idea also that somehow it's the youth that need to be helped. The implication is we can abandon everyone else.
Right.
If we wanted to really help Native people, we should stop fracking, mining, and exploiting their land.
Arun Gupta, thanks as always for joining us. Arun Gupta is a journalist and a contributor to The Guardian in these times, The Progressive, and Truth Out. We'll be right back.